Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, a free site, bettingangle.us, a free site. Today is January 26, 2025, the closing minutes of it. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. I was wrong on the Diego Pacheco Steve Nelson fight. I didn't think that fight would go the distance. Not necessarily that I thought Pacheco, the big favorite, was going to win the fight. I just thought that something was going to happen in that fight where someone was going to get stopped. Right? The bet I recommended to my paid subscribers was a round group betting prop, right? That could have watered a lot of plants. Instead, what we got was a Pacheco masterpiece, at least for the first 10 rounds. I have the highlights in my favorites folder here online. Pacheco, who's tall, does a lot of things very well. He's still figuring out how to lean backward, but just understand, this is the tall guy who, like Larry Holmes, understands that he can leverage what I call ring coverage. He sticks a jab in your face. It's very hard to get by the jab. Understand, Steve Nelson, 36 years old, right, is a good athlete. He looked like he had more stamina than Diego Pacheco, right? Nelson comes alive in the 11th and 12th rounds. The crowd gets into it during those rounds. But just understand, Nelson just didn't have the upper body movement. He just didn't have the Joe Frazier bob and weave, the Mike Tyson bob and weave to get by the jab. So you had a clinic here. You had a boxer puncher. That's who Pacheco is. Pacheco has a lot of knockouts. He has power, right? Particularly on his hooks. He can take you out. But what you had was Pacheco setting up shop, keeping Nelson away from him, while Pacheco banked the first two-thirds of the fight. Right? Understand, Nelson unbeaten coming in. Let me say something that'll sound loaded. Style-wise, Nelson was a tough matchup for Pacheco. Right? The athletic bruiser type guy who's going to try to get in the pocket and riddle your body. Right? For a tall fighter, that carries a lot of risk. But Pacheco has some slickness to him. In other words, he's hitting you with the jab. If you find a way to slip the jab and jump in the pocket, this is the guy who knows how to tie you up. The tall guy who knows how to tie you up. So you'll notice in the film, a few times Nelson gets inside. Pacheco somehow finds a way to hold on to his glove, to have his glove on the side of Pacheco's body. Right? Pacheco doesn't get lulled into, until the last two rounds, a shootout in the pocket. Rather, Pacheco always is seeing Nelson, is keeping Nelson outside, and when Nelson jumps inside, Pacheco ties him up. Now, I know some pundits online didn't like that. They wanted Pacheco to be able to fight better inside. Against a shorter opponent? You know, Pacheco has inside skills that he could show against someone more his size. But against Nelson, it would have been too dangerous. Right? The last two rounds, Nelson starts landing hooks, and you see what could have been. But by then, Nelson's tank is a bit depleted. He doesn't have the power that he had in the early part of the fight when Pacheco is keeping him outside with a jab and movement. Let me also say, too, appreciate a prospect who knows what he's doing. Pacheco obviously is world class and ranked, but he's a young guy. And understand, this is the slugger who, when you try to get in the pocket, he not only is hitting you with the jab, he's backing up. He has a back foot. He also has an awareness of where he is in the ring. Right? This isn't the slugger where it's feast or famine. Either he's laying you out, keeping you outside and doling out punishment, or he doesn't know what's going on because he only knows how to be alpha. He can't be beta. Right? Just understand, this guy is different. This guy doesn't want the shootout. Right? This is the slugger who is content with the fight in third gear, as long as he's winning rounds. If you, the opponent, get too aggressive, if you start having delusions that you can actually win the fight, then he can disabuse you of those delusions with some excellent hooks. He's two-handed. Right? Pacheco's going to be a tough out for anyone at 168. The reason why I'm mentioning it, and this is a very important fighter to watch, is because next September, Terence Crawford is coming up to 168 to fight Canelo. Right now, I'm guessing that fight might be a walkaway fight for both guys. Right? The idea is, okay, we're first ballot Hall of Famers. My bank account has several figures in it. My family's not starving. Both guys are in their 30s. They've been there. They've done that. They've been undisputed. Right? One could see the guy saying, okay, let's walk away. I'm just telling you, and I'm going to be diplomatic with this. Right? Diego Pacheco, and Crawford was at the fight. Right? Steve Nelson is his good friend. Those guys go back years. Right? Diego Pacheco would be a tough opponent for both men. Right? The real unbeaten fighter in boxing is Father Time. Right? Pacheco, much taller than both guys. Right? I would imagine Crawford, who chopped down Avanesian with body shots. Canelo, who chopped down, name it, Rocky Fielding with body shots, Liam Smith with body shots. I'm sure both of those guys would need to get deep in the pocket against Diego Pacheco. Right? They would see a tall guy and they would say, hey, there's not a lot of meat on this guy's midsection. Let me go to work. Just understand, Pacheco is a boxer puncher. While you're trying to walk him down and get inside of his reach, because if you stay outside, you're going to get beaten by several rounds like Steve Nelson just did. Right? If you try to get inside on him, that's when Pacheco's going to start sitting down on his punches. Folks, look at the KO ratio. Right? Pacheco is a huckleberry for me. I had a fight where his opponent just had to make it to some round, like round 7 or something like that. And the guy was completely lucid. The guy was well on his way, I thought. Then Pacheco landed some body shots. That's how hard the guy hits. He landed some body shots and stopped the guy I bet on. Right? I made a video. Go back through my Diego Pacheco videos here online. You'll find it. Right? Pacheco can stop you with one punch. He has a luxury neither Canelo nor Crawford has. Because of his reach, Pacheco can stay outside. The fight doesn't start until you find a way to get by Pacheco's jab. And it's difficult. Right? Understand, Steve Nelson is an athlete in my eyes. But he doesn't really have that upper body movement, that, herky-jerky motion. To be blunt, look at the biographies of Joe Frazier, Mike Tyson, right? Being able to have that bob and weave upper body movement is really something you have when you're young. Both Frazier and Tyson had it when they were younger. Right? Frazier's pretty much out of the sport by the late 70s. Right? Tyson, let's just say the best Mike Tyson is the very young Mike Tyson. Right? It's Tyson against people like Marvis Frazier, Michael Spinks, Larry Holmes. Right? Tyson later started getting hit, didn't he? Right? So just to understand, you're going to have fighters like Steve Nelson, who you think of as rough and tumble. Right? Comes to fight. Nelson just went 12 rounds with Diego Pacheco. Right? Nelson's still someone you need to think about. He's the perfect opponent, quite frankly, for a Canelo at 168. Because you're going to get an action-packed fight. Right? But let's just say Canelo hits harder than Steve Nelson. Right? But just understand, against Pacheco, it was a non-fight. It's Pacheco sticking a jab out there and Nelson struggling to dodge it. Right? He didn't have that Joe Frazier ability to dodge Ali's jab and to back Ali up because he's 36. Right? I'm not sure if many in today's heavyweight division have that ability. Right? Diego Pacheco, too, keep a hard eye on him. Because just understand, he's just filling out. You're going to have guys stepping away from the sport, in my eyes, at 175. Right? Understand, Beterbiev, he's older. I do think Beterbiev, because of his fight style, has another couple years if he wants. Right? 2-3 years maybe. But the way I look at it, and it's going to be a problem for people. Right? Just understand, if Bivol loses to Beterbiev, his career might end. Right? He will have done all he could. He would have found his Waterloo. What's the point in going on? Is he going to pivot to fight others, right? Buatsi, etc.? I doubt it. Right? Boxing's a punishing sport. I encourage people to look at the great article right now on BoxingScene.com involving Timothy Bradley, where he gives an interview, and folks, it's a Pulitzer Prize-worthy interview, where he's talking about CTE risks and stuff like that. Boxing's a dangerous sport. If you have money in the bank, guys are going to leave. Right? Well, let me just say, I want people to look at David Benavidez, and David Morrell. Folks, they're too big. I'll just be blunt here. They're too big for 175. I know they just got there. Right? But you look at Morrell especially. He's been wearing baggy clothes to events. Right? And you just look at his upper body and you understand he's going to have to jump up in weight. Folks, there is no 187-pound division. You're going to have to jump up to 200. Right? So as 175, and it's loaded right now, right? You have two great fights. Beterbiev, Bivol, Benavidez, Morrell. You also have Anthony Yard, who might be too heavy these days for 175. You have Buatsi. You have others at 175. Right? Diego Pacheco, I believe, is going to eventually be up at 175. Right? Weight, when you're in your 20s, you lose control over part of it. In other words, you go from waking up knowing that you weigh 160 or whatever, and then suddenly, you start maturing, your voice gets deeper, you hop on the scale, you notice you weigh a little bit more, right? There's only going to be so much Pacheco can do. He's thin right now. As he gets meat on his bones, I'm telling you, he's going to be a big force at 175. I think an Anthony Yard would have a very hard time dealing with him. Yard, of course, lost to Kovalev, who has an excellent jab. He then lost to Lyndon Arthur, who has an excellent jab, right? He figured out how to be rough and tumble and trying to walk through Lyndon Arthur's jab, right? He wins the rematch. Just understand, Lyndon Arthur does not hit as hard, in my opinion, as Diego Pacheco. So let me just say, I know Pacheco's getting a lot of heat because of the last 2 rounds. He did get hit with some excellent shots. Let's keep in mind that he did better in this fight than I thought he would. Right? He outboxes an unbeaten Steve Nelson thoroughly for the first 2/3 of the fight. Right, folks? That's an accomplishment. Right? When you see a tall guy who knows what he's doing, who can move, who knows to throw the jab, who understands that if he throws predominantly hooks, he's giving away his ring coverage. So there is at least a 2.5-foot space for protracted periods of this fight between Pacheco and Steve Nelson, right? This is the tall guy who understands I'm tall. Let me keep this guy outside, and then does a masterful job. And of course doesn't panic when the guy is able to get a step closer, knows how to move, knows how to be on his back foot, knows how to stay away from the ropes, knows how to circle in the ring. Let me say too, Steve Nelson, maybe he was too old to use a lot of lateral movement. You got the feeling the fight could have been different if Nelson knew how to move laterally a little bit better. In other words, Pacheco's moving back, get low, come in on a side angle, confuse the kid with different angles. Nelson didn't do that enough. For my purposes, the fight stings. Simply because if the fight didn't go the distance, I would have done well. The fight went the distance, I lost it all. Let me hear from you. This was a video I made for paid subscribers. I'm just sharing this post-fight video with the public. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.